Is that John?
I'm afraid it is, Jason.
I knew you'd be trouble.
Oh, don't be like that. Just because I'm Welsh.
Nothing wrong with that.
How are you today?
I'm great. Such a pleasure to see you, John. I've admired your work for a long time, and obviously, I definitely want to cover playing the four highlights in Gentle Giant. But actually, I want to dig a bit deeper as well into some of your work in the 60s, if that's okay.
Of course.
I spoke to Derek recently as well, so great to get your perspective on playing the four, one of the great prog albums of the 70s. What do you remember about those dates that make up that album?
Only that it was a very successful European tour, uh, all good sized gigs, around the 8,000. Um, and the band was hot. We just come off an American tour, I think. Um, it seemed at that moment that we were about to do it, go somewhere.
Great period for the group in that you'd had that back catalogue. I know you joined a few years later, 72, but you'd had like 5 years with you in the group, basically, you know, releasing a series of great albums, gigging regularly. So in a way, you could say that you were at the peak of the group.
I would agree with that. Yeah, yeah. It's that was before, all the kind of about 77, everything started to get a bit wobbly, didn't it?
Yeah.
But I mean, that kind of our kind of music was very, very popular at that time, and it seemed then that it was never going to end. It was like something really great, and you could just it would I don't know, there was something starting to creep in, um, an uncertainty. The record companies in particular were looking for, you know, they weren't happy with good sales. They wanted great sales. So they were always, pushing for uh, top 20 hits, which some of the bands of our ilk were turning out.
Genesis was one of the first groups
Oh,
to
yeah.
go that way. Yes, certainly by 1980, switched and it kind of gelled by 82, 83.
Yeah, but they had a couple of very catchy kind of tunes before that. Um, you know, it was kind of headed that way. Everybody was looking for a hit just to. The hope was, of course, that you'd get into the top 20 or something like that with a good song, and then people would start investigating your back catalogue. And we thought that'll do us if they go back to the likes of Glasshouse and particularly Power and the Glory. We're well in because there was some great stuff on those.
Fantastic talents in the band where you all seem to play quite a range of instruments. Even yourself, you didn't just stick all the time to drums.
No, no, I'm game for a laugh. Me and anything goes. You give me something, I'll get a tune out of it, unless it's a trumpet or a saxophone.
You had a few percussionists in the group, didn't you? So you weren't the only one who could play drums.
Oh, everybody could. Gary is an excellent, like, drummer, a real drummer. Kerry uh, has got a degree in percussion, so I'm not even on the same planet as him. As was shown with all the percussive tunes that he did design, classic examples. We just let him to it, and any percussion as such was done by Kerry.
I know the percussion you mixed it up on albums sometimes. terms of different members playing different instruments. Did that occur on stage where you swapped around, or was it mainly only when you were playing in the studio?
No, there was the drum bash, of course, where everybody played drums. I played vibes on stage in Experience. Yeah, that was it with percussion. I played vibes and glockenspiel on stage, but everybody played drums really well.
It's a mark of, some of the great bands have just got full of talent. It amplifies when you've got different members who can contribute in different ways and mix it up. It keeps things exciting.
Yeah, I think particularly with the cello and violin, uh, as additions to the live show, I mean that kept it really, really on the boil as far as the audience were concerned. Things were happening all the time, and they could hardly keep up with it. To my mind, whether they seemed to love it anyway. Whenever the boys went on to stringed instruments, the violin and the cello, and of course the violin feature was something to be seen. It really was.
Where did you see yourself in terms of one of your key roles of the group, in the sense that you've got that background in soul and R&B where you could keep, key time where the other guys could go off, but you'd be there underpinning it. But obviously, you weren't averse to more complex parts or whatever. How did that play out? Was your focus on those more complex tracks, trying to hold everything together?
Yeah, that's the way I've always played, really. I've said before that I don't have the chops of Bruford, Palmer. Um, I just, so I don't get very excited about playing every single phrase that's going, grabbing everything. Uh, I'd prefer to listen to what the boys are doing and give them the space, and just keep that groove going underneath. And I think that's where we differed. Well, you could see it when Mr. White took over uh, the Yes drum chair, and he started laying it down, and it was a totally different band. I mean, when somebody else, another guitar player, joined, Trevor Rabin, in the 80s, it became like a rock band,
Mm.
and some great kind of uh, hit records. They were a totally different band, and I think Alan had the same effect on Yes as I did on Gentle Giant, if that's not being too big-headed.
Not at all.
It was just an approach, a different approach that we decided on early on in my time with the boys. Just after I joined, really, I said, well, why don't I play just straight tempo through this? It'll give you guys space on the top. And they said, yeah, let's try it out. And I said, oh yeah, that sounds good actually. So we kept it that way.
Let's go back a few years to the
Oh,
early 60s, and then we'll work our way back up. So tell us about your early groups. I've seen some names like the Vikings and the Brothers Grimm. Were you mainly playing covers, or was it your own material in the band?
um, well, it started off really with the Vikings, and that was just 1962. So that was just rock and roll covers in that, and we played a little bit of R&B, which had just started to creep across then. Um, Then I went on to the Eyes of Blue, which was the big learning curve, really, because we started off as a soul band and then moved from that to including more modern R&B as the Tamla Motown scene was getting more popular and complex. And from there, West Coast music started coming in. By then we had a residency down at the Speakeasy.
Made that transition from South Wales to London.
Yeah, in 1966 we won the Melody Maker Beat competition as the Eyes of Blue, and started touring. Did a big a British tour with Georgie Fame and Eric Burdon and the Animals and Paul Butterfield Blues Band. A proper package tour of Odeon halls, and then got different management and started doing a lot of London gigs, which is where we started encountering then the West Coast movement, with Love, The Doors. That stuff started creeping in. We embraced that, and from that started to write our own stuff. And because Phil Ryan, he came from a classical background, he started introducing bits and pieces of classical music. We would arrange classical pieces for a rock band and play those.
It's naturally getting more progressive in a way.
Yeah, that's exactly the way it was. In fact, one night we were playing in London and all of the members of Yes were up the back of the hall, at the back of the room, kind of taking notes. And they stayed for the whole set. Fair play. I didn't expect them to, but they did. And they were of the same ilk, they were in the same sort of general direction. But unfortunately, Eyes of Blue disappeared. And from there, I moved on then to different pastures.
In that 1969, 1970, I think you did work with a group known as Strawberry Dust.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, racing cars.
Yeah.
I kind of took them under my wing. I thought I was a brilliant songwriter and a great producer, all because I'd done 3 or 4 albums. I had the temerity to take them under my wing and persuade Lou Reisner that they should record an album of mostly my songs. Oh God, so embarrassed. And he agreed. And so they did. We did an album that I produced under the name of Ancient Greece, and which was full of dreadful songs, badly produced, and it was. I think it was. It was as a tax relief for Mercury Records in England, the UK branch of Mercury Records. Anyway, it wasn't very successful. It's more successful now than it was then.
Obviously, that may ultimately have been off-putting in relation to songwriting, but I know you did, certainly with the song Friends, write some material. And I think you sung that as well, didn't you?
Yeah, that was the only thing I wrote for Gentle Giant, because there's absolutely no way on earth that I could compete with the writing of Shulman, Munir. Yeah. And I just turned up with this little song, and at that particular point, which was, let me see, that well-known Gentle Giant favorite with all the fans album, Giant for a Day, They were looking for something different, so so we recorded that.
Tell us about the circumstances of joining Gentle Giant, because Malcolm Mortimer was the band's drummer, but do you have a injury or an accident, which then
Yeah,
led?
yeah. It was a motorcycle or a car crash, and he was really busted up, legs, arms, pelvis, in a mess. Well, I'd known the Shulman brothers since the Simon Dupree days when they came down to Wales.
I guess you were peers, Isa Blue and Simon
Yeah,
Dupree.
very much so. And we'd kind of moved along in the same along the same tracks as it were. They moved into West Coast, R&B, then West Coast, and then they became Gentle Giant from Simon Dupree. But I'd known them from the Simon Dupree days, and we just happened to be. I was playing with Graham Bond at the time at London Polytechnic, and Ray, the bass player, recognised me. They came up to see the gig. They were playing downstairs, we were playing upstairs, and he came and said hello. He said, "You used to be with the Eyes of Blue." I said, "Oh yeah, Simon Dupree playing here." "No," he said, "we've got a new band now called Gentle Giant. Come down for a look." And I did. Well, we were friendly, we had a good chat. It was nice to see Raymond. He was a wonderful bloke. And when Malcolm had his accident, the thing was then that they had a tour coming up and needed a drummer pronto. Well, they gave Mike Giles a ring,
Right.
and he didn't want to know for some
Really?
reason. Yeah, I'm most surprised. Perhaps it wasn't jazzy enough. I really don't know, but he didn't even bother to go and do an audition or anything. He just said point blank no. But I think he might have had a band going at that time. Giles, Fripp, and no, there was Giles. I've
Yeah.
Anyway. His second call was to me, and the Grease band had just split up because Henry had joined Wings, so I was at a loose end. And Raymond somehow, I never found out how, got hold of my telephone number and asked me if I was interested in doing a tour with them because their drummer had an accident. And I said, yeah, sure. He said, can you come down to Portsmouth and do an audition? I said, yes. So off I went down to Portsmouth, did the audition, and they said, okay, well, if you can do the tour with us, with a bit of luck, Malcolm will be better by then, but we'll pay a good wage for the tour. I said, great. And we had 2 weeks to rehearse for the tour, which was the one with the Jimi Hendrix movie.
Oh.
Well, by the end of the tour, they said, well, we like the way it's all come together. We like this new laying it down in the back, giving it plenty of welly. Heavy left hand. Would you like the gig? And I said, well, yeah, absolutely. And moved to Portsmouth. And that was it. That was March or April 1972.
Is it that year where Gentle Giant supported Black Sabbath, and were you in the group?
Yep. That was my first American tour. And it was with Sabbath, yeah.
That's quite a contrast, isn't it? Gentle Giant and Sabbath on the same bill.
Oh, it was very exciting every night. Dodge the beer can. Well, we had a good go. I mean, we were brave. And I remember one gig, we went down really, really well, and they wanted an encore.
Gosh.
But wild times. Let us put it like that. It was a good introduction, actually, to touring in America as the most of underdogs that are almost certain to be disliked by the audience that you're facing. But we just did our very, very best, and the only real place we suffered was in the Hollywood Bowl, where somebody was threw firecrackers on stage during the performance, and that was not very nice at all. And Phil called them some very nasty names. But other than that, it was more like a holiday, because Sabbath missed quite a few gigs due to various.
So the shows, so you're saying that some of the shows were cancelled, therefore you had free time?
Yeah, and in nice places down in Florida and Nashville and a couple of other places. But but it was a very, very good tour. We enjoyed that. It was for almost a month, about 3 weeks. They were great guys, really smashing fellas. And then we moved on to support Yes then.
So was that more of a natural synergy?
Oh, well, we were laughing on that one, weren't we? The only problem really was that the Eagles were on in between. We opened the show.
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah. We opened the show, then the Eagles, before they became famous, obviously. And then Yes. So they were sandwiched. You had this country rock band sandwiched in between two prog bands. And they weren't very happy.
So they weren't happy about the fit?
No, they were not very happy at all with us being on the tour. So I don't know. So our tour with them was kind of curtailed a little. I think they insisted that we get dumped. Because in those days, to get on a decent tour, you had to pay.
Oh, of course, yeah. So you were basically doing it to promote the group and get yourselves out there. You weren't
Yeah.
making money out of it. You were actually
Oh,
paying money to.
no, it was costing the management company. Our management company was the same as Black Sabbath's.
Right.
And in the same office was the management company of Yes.
So it's all interlinked.
Yeah, so it's all a bit,
So you've been on tour, you've got
Yeah,
that grounding. So I guess you were then at some point recording Octopus, which is a fabulous album.
yeah. Well, that happened. What happened was we finished the little stint with Yes, did a couple of odd gigs here and there, and we had to. Our manager, Pat Meehan Senior, said, "Well, hang about. I'm trying to put something together here. Can you wait in? Can you wait for a few days in New York?" So we did, and like tourists. And all of a sudden, we had a phone call saying, "Ah, right, I've got you on the Tull tour for a month." And we said, "Yes, thank you." And we went on tour. The band had already been on tour in Europe with Tull, with Malcolm. And Tull liked the band. So they were only too happy to have us on tour for a whole month, 28 days. I think there was only 2 days off in the whole tour. And that really sharpened the band up big time.
You're not having to dodge firecrackers.
No. And opening for Tull was perfect. And they, of course, were one of the most professional, friendly, talented bands you could ever support. So we learned everything off them: stagecraft, getting there on time, how to behave when you're on tour. You don't get that off touring with Sabbath. But that was great. And then we came back from that and recorded Octopus.
How did recording the tracks work, given the multifaceted nature of a number of them? Did you have to map them out, or did certain members of the band play elements and you'd kind of work out how the drum patterns would evolve depending on the changes?
Yeah. We discussed it, obviously. And I always asked, I had so much respect for both Kerry and Ray. I just asked them if they'd always asked them if there was anything in particular they'd like, or they'd like me to try. If there wasn't anything in particular, we just discuss, I'd play something and say, is this okay? And they say, yes, no, can you do blah, you know. And I was always open to any suggestions whatsoever. But generally, I was allowed to have my head, just carry on.
What do you remember about the making of In a Glass House? Because the sound effects, the glass, I think there's different bits of percussion in there.
Mm,
How did that all come together? Because it's very innovative and is in a way like some of the stuff that Peter Gabriel would do quite a bit later.
mm. Um, well, well, Phil had left the band. He
Yeah.
decided after the American tour that with small children and a wife at home, that he didn't want to tour. And he's 10 years older than the rest of the band. So it was a bit of a crisis, and there was talk of splitting up, but we got over that pretty quick. So it was In a Glass House was the first album without Phil. And don't forget, Phil had been in, and the two brothers had been playing together since the late 50s,
Yeah.
early 60s. So it was a case of actually with Ray and Derek proving themselves, that they could do just as well without Phil as with Phil.
That they were having to step up in a way and prove that Gentle Giant could be viable and successful without him.
Yeah, Phil used to do a lot of the lyrics. He and Derek kind of collaborated, but Phil came up with a lot of the ideas. Knots, for instance, Panage, and all the deep reading that he did that gave him the ideas for the songs. But of course, when it came to In a Glass House, I think Ray and Kerry were given it even more as far as the writing is concerned. And Derek was out to prove something as well with the lyrics he provided on his own. So it was a challenge for everybody. But I knew it was going to come off because I had such great faith in the band as it was, as a 5-piece band. Even though, as a 6-piece band, Phil did add a great deal. He had a great voice. He played sax, he played percussion. But we managed okay, no problem. I took over his vocals as far as recording was concerned, where they needed a bit of extra texture. I took over the singing part, and that seemed to fit okay. So there we are. We were very happy with the album, unlike the American record company.
Oh, really?
Oh, they refused to put it out.
Do you know why that was?
Well, they thought it wasn't commercial enough. They just didn't like it, period. So our management put it out and released it in America on import.
You were one of the biggest import sellers
Yeah.
around, weren't you?
Well, it was only the one album. It was only In a Glass House that was on import. And it got into the top 100. Oh, I mean, we had great faith in the record. I thought it was a great record. Some beautiful stuff on there. But so we changed record companies then for Power and the Glory.
Freehand, in particular, that seemed to be an album where things did lift significantly in America. Is that accurate?
Yeah, oh yes, because of the I mean, when something becomes hard to get, it becomes popular. And I think that's why, because people were finding it really hard to get in a glass house on import, simply because of the volumes, supplying volumes of records from England to America, when the whole thing isn't geared up for that. All of a sudden we had a cult following. Oh, these guys, oh, have you heard this group called Gentle Giant? You can't get the record here. I've got one. You know, that's the way it kind of. So of course, when Freehand came along, there was a lot more interest, and Capitol Records were very happy to pick it up.
Would you say that Interview was the last album before the group really started to shift its sound?
Well, I would say that Missing Piece is half and half.
Right.
Side one is far more accessible because that's the way that the river was flowing.
That like 2 weeks in Spain.
Yeah. Oh, that was a laugh. That, like Derek putting on the London accent and stuff like that. And I mean, it's a good tune. Yeah, but side two is very Gentle Giant. Memories of Old Days. It's absolutely lovely. It's For Nobody. Oh, there's some that is the last of Gentle Giant as was perceived from the early 70s. Interview was kind of, I don't know, they were difficult times, very difficult times.
I mean, many would say that the final Gentle Giant album, Civilian, I mean,
Yeah,
that's still got some great material. You're working with Jeff Emerick, and in a way, some of that material fits your what could be seen as your natural style.
yes, yeah. I mean, that's one of my favorite albums because all of a sudden it's Jeff was there, and it was this huge sound of a mixture of songs. Underground is very kind of Gentle Giant, the accessible side of Gentle Giant, but I love number one, and I like the whole album. I think it really rocks. And there were other bands that followed that lead later on in the 80s, who had been in the same kind of progressive stable. If you look at Yes, when Trevor Rabin joined, that's the kind of genre that they ended up in. And it sounded great when they played it. So I think we were quite early on that. I think we discovered where we were going with Civilian, but it was, as far as the record company was concerned, it was too late. They didn't want to know.
You'd found a path forward into the 1980s, which could have really branched out and bore fruit, but it was the label that put the mockers on it, and if you don't have significant label backing, it certainly in those days it becomes very, very tricky to carry on, I guess.
Oh yeah, I mean, we financed the last tour ourselves, the last
Really?
American tour. Yeah, we all put our houses, got second mortgages out, and we toured in a camper. We didn't fly anywhere, really. but all the writing was on the wall then already. Kerry and Derek were. Derek had just got married. Kerry had a young daughter. He was tired of touring. Derek really wanted to get into the business side of it. So it was the last tour, and it was very enjoyable too. It was absolutely wonderful. Playing smaller venues, which we like. We always did like smaller venues because it was a more personal thing. You could get a more personal thing going with the audience, and we like to perform and play. I mean, that's what the band was all about, was playing live. Great.
Which therefore shows in playing the fool.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, it's Dan's done a magnificent job on doing it.
It's a bit more like you're at the live show rather than a very condensed version of it, which we heard with the original version.
Yeah, well, of course, the original version, it was the best you could do, really, was 2 vinyl albums, a double album. Now it's 3, and 2 CDs and Blu-ray and Atmos, surround sound, you name it, it's all in there. So the Atmos apparently, I'm not too well up on all of that stuff. It's like you're sitting in the middle of the theatre, which is why he's included Ray's violin solo, which there was no point in us putting it on the live album, the original Playing the Fool, because it was mostly visual.
Yeah.
But now you can tell what he was doing. He used to have a pedal board with all sorts of effects that would send the violin all around the theatre. And now you can get that with the Atmos.
Talking to Derek, he's very clear about the fact that Gentle Giant not regrouping together for him was the right decision because you could never go back. Do you have the same view, or would you have liked to have another go in later years?
Truth? No, I don't think so. I don't think so. I don't know of anybody who's actually done that and gone anywhere. In reality, let's be fair. Everybody does these comeback tours, and yeah. With one particular band, it's like it ended up being 3 bands all going out under the same name and giving all the old tunes a thrashing. It just becomes embarrassing. And of course, everybody went off to do different things.
You played with Man, didn't you? So you're kind of in touch with your Welsh roots and
Yeah,
peers. So you were able to continue in the 80s and 90s playing live and recording, didn't you?
yes, yeah. I spent 13 years with Man. I'd known them, of course, since the 60s. So,
The Bystanders.
yeah. Oh, yeah. We used to do all the same gigs in Swansea and Southwest Wales. So I knew them all very well. I knew them as Man when they lived in London and did all the early Man stuff. So when they got back together, Terry was playing in Rockpile. So they wanted another Welsh drummer. So I was the obvious choice, I guess, because I'd already been in a band with Martin Ace. So we gave that a go, and that was okay, cruising along for a few years. We did a live album, and then we did a nice album called The Twang Dynasty. And then we did the last album then, called On the Moon, which we recorded in Seattle. And then I got fired.
Really?
Yeah. There was all sorts of things going on. I wasn't very happy.
Mm.
I wasn't very happy at all. It's just it had I'd gone as far as I could go with the music and the people. So, and it was showing in my playing and my attitude towards the rest of the guys. So one of them phoned me up and said, "You're fired." And then he told the other two members, "Oh, I've sacked John." And they said, "What?" But I was happy to be sacked, if you know what I mean.
Well, in a way, it kind of almost reinforces what you said about Gentle Giant in that you finished at the right time.
Yeah, yeah. No, I just can't see, Gentle Giant coming back 10 years later or even 5 years later and going through all the old stuff. No, it would have been naff.
I, I'm just trying to think if there was any kind of other peers of yours that didn't come back in some capacity.
I don't think there are. I think they all had to go.
And that, I guess that, as well as the incredible material that you made, that's like almost a cherry on the top. It's like that's one of the unique defining characters of Gentle Giant is that you never went back. What was there for a decade stands on its own terms without anything muddy in the water.
No, that's right, because I think everybody that's come back, it's gone down and down and down and down. There are people who've lost their voices, who can't play as well. Um, it. I'm glad we didn't, because I would hate. I've got a condition which prevents me from playing at all. Now, this started back in 2000, and at the time I was just doing a few gigs around Swansea, and doing Welsh pantomime and some TV and bits and pieces. But I felt this coming on, and it got to a point where it was starting to affect my playing. And I said, right, that's it. Finish. Boom. I played one gig where I played bass drum with my left foot. And I said, no, this is no good. So you just have to. There was no way that I was going to be trying to play and have people I knew out there looking at me going, "Look at him, he can't do it anymore." And there he is. So maybe you can understand from that point of view. So that applies to the Gentle Giant thing and to the Man thing as well.
Well, what a legacy, what recorded material, what live material with playing the Fool that you guys have left in Gentle Giant. John, it's been a real privilege and a joy to talk to you. Thank you so much. It's been great hearing your memories of your whole career, but of course, the wonderful Gentle Giant. Thank you.
Oh, an absolute pleasure anytime.